Welcome back to Insights from the Couch. We've got a great episode for you today where Laura and I are going to dive deep into anxiety, how women experience anxiety, the different types of anxiety, what causes it, and how to best cope with it. So this is one you won't want to miss because anxiety affects as much as 20% of the population. So Laura, I'm excited to talk about this today because you specialize in treating anxiety and I kind of specialize in having it. Even though obviously I have some experience treating it as well, especially in the past when I did EMDR. But I think this is a great topic to dive into.
You know, it's so interesting you say that because I am an anxious person also, but I don't think it's as noticeable because I think my tendency when I'm anxious is avoidance. Do you know what I mean?
I do, but is this you telling me my anxiety is noticeable?
Well, I mean, you're out front about it, right? Like if you're worried about something, but the thing about you is your anxiety really works for you.
Yeah.
Because it propels you to act. It propels you to problem solve. It's the right kind of anxiety. I'm actually a little jealous of your brand of anxiety.
Thank you.
I sometimes want to do a whole blog about wanting to the wannabe type A, because I am such a wannabe type A. I'm not type A, but I kind of aspire to be.
How do you define type A? Because I think we wanted today to talk a little bit about the different variants of anxiety in women. And let me just set the stage before we answer this question, that anxiety is the most common health disorder. It's estimated that as much as nearly 20% of the population struggles with anxiety. It's twice as common in women as in men. And that may be for a variety of reasons. Some of it may be misdiagnosing based on gender norms. But regardless, those are the current numbers. And there is a difference between anxiety, which is a natural emotion and can be extremely useful, right? Situationally, anxiety is letting you know that something is dangerous and you need to act, but that it really becomes problematic for people when it's pervasive, it interferes with functioning, right? And it really can derail people. So that's the stage to set. But we're going to talk a little bit about the type A, sort of high functioning anxious woman versus the crippling, debilitating body is in a state of alarm, regardless of situational variables. So with that said, I want to hear your definition of type A. I'm so curious. Not clinical, just how you think of it.
I see type A people as being driven and uncomfortable with leaving things undone and having to act. Whereas, and they're compelled. So I know it's uncomfortable. It can be really uncomfortable for people. This is me. I'm kind of more of a beta person to begin with. So I look at it enviously because I have a tendency to take something and be like, oh, I'm great at compartmentalizing. This is a little special skill I have. And I think some people might be jealous of that ability, but I can be like, oh, I'll deal with that one later. And then I will get into a moment where the anxiety is too heavy and I have to act all at once. So when I see people who are always got that drive to act, I'm going to work out, I'm going to send the email, I'm going to do the project, I'm going to start early, I'm going to get it done early. I'm like, what would it be like to just have the ability to act all the time?
Okay. So you're talking about it as a driver rather than an avoidance. And it's interesting because I think anxiety can lead to both manifestations. And I can actually do both. I can get very procrastinatory and very quickly narrate reasons why something that feels too overwhelming, or it feels too overwhelming because I feel like I don't know how to do it. Yes. Right. I don't know how to get it done. Then sometimes I just want to stick my head in the sand and just say fuck it, la, 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 la. And then I'll be like, oh, well, I deserve a day off. And, and of course I deserve a day off, but that's procrastination.
Yeah. But how do you deal with fear? When you're really afraid?
Well, it depends.
Does that lead to act? Does it most often lead you to act?
Not necessarily. Okay. It depends.
Curious.
The way I think of it is So my personal brand of anxiety, and truly, even as a clinician, and before I started only working with couples, I did work with a lot of people with anxiety, and I predominantly treated it with EMDR, which
Yeah.
is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and had some good results with that. But I saw many different flavors and manifestations of anxiety, including I had many male clients with anxiety that they mostly tried to suppress, mask, and bury in like alcohol consumption,
Yes. Yes.
So, and they have these high achieving careers, and they're not standing there going like this, like, oh, I'm so worried on the street corner, like I am.
Right.
So, right. So it's not as noticeable. The way I experience anxiety is that I don't live in a state of body alarm. I don't live in a state of activation. My anxiety does tend to be precipitated by something that's happening I'm afraid of. That said, I'm afraid of a lot. Like a
Yes.
lot. I'm extremely claustrophobic. I'm afraid of heights. I'm afraid of being murdered to like a quasi irrational degree. I walk around with a lot going on up here. Now, am I anxious, or am I just neurotic, or am I just very
What does it feel like
uniquely?
to you?
What it feels like to me is that I'm just a worrier. I think my self-assessment after 51 years of exploring this and trying to work on it is that I have a very sensitive limbic system, a very
Yes.
hypersensitive amygdala, which is the fear center, and the limbic system is your emotional brain. So it's part of what makes me creative, and it helps me attune to people and helps me intuit what's going on. But as a result, if I'm walking down a road and somebody feels shady to me, I've already in 10 seconds narrated my murder, where I'm going to be buried. Will it be solved? How can I leave evidence? What will I do to fight back? Like that
Oh
comes.
my God.
Yeah. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but only a little.
A little, only a little. So
Yeah.
yeah. So like, let's talk, because I think that most people, I always see like anxiety as like the dormant volcano, and that by the time you're really getting symptoms, it's erupting.
Right.
But like people are always like, why do I have anxiety? And to me, it's like, it's all these like things underneath the volcano that you don't see. So like it starts with our culture. I think we have a very anxiety producing culture. It's capitalistic, it's competitive, it's fast paced. It's not designed to make you feel great about yourself. So I think that it just grinds on the human system. And then on top of that is like what you're talking about is like your temperament that you're born with.
Yeah.
You know, the shy child, the sensitive child. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
never forget your little shoe story at the circus and how worried you were your mom would not get her shoe back. Like those kinds of, like, I thought somebody was going to climb in my window and kill me as a kid. Like I was
Me
shy,
too.
sensitive, fearful.
So
if you-
I was sensitive and fearful, but not shy.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And very sensitive and very always going into my parents' room and being like if we saw a movie, the movie would be in my
Yes.
head for like 3 years.
Same.
So I really have gotten better at protecting my brain from certain things, but not enough, because like I know what I should keep out of my helmet, but like I'm still
Sometimes you go for it though. All your like murder stories, you go
Totally.
deep
I'm still
into.
compulsively watching Dateline because I'm like drawn to the dark. But what I wanted to say to you about fear that I think is so important, the way I see fear, regardless of anxiety, is that if I want what's on the other side of the fear, then I'm going to push through the anxiety and take action.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, like, I'll give you an example. I'm afraid of heights. Okay. I don't care that I'm afraid of heights. I have no desire to go up high. I don't want to ski. I did it once. I was like, never again. I'll go for the après ski, but like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not getting on a chairlift.
You don't value it.
No, I don't value it. But I'm scared of getting up in front of an audience, but I also love public speaking and want to do it and enjoy it and think I'm good at it. So that fear is actually extremely potent and activating, and not unlike getting on a chairlift, but I'm willing to get up and do it because I want what's on the other side.
I love that you said that. And like, let's put a pin in that, because I think that's one of the ways that we treat anxiety, because there is stuff that isn't worth tackling. And then there is stuff that you really do value and you want to get to the other side of fear. And that's where we really begin to think about treatment.
So let's come to that when we talk about treating it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like in my little dormant volcano, we have culture, we have temperament, and then you go a rung above that. And it's like, how is your caregiver with your temperament? Did they exacerbate that? Did your environment exacerbate your temperament? Or was it, great with your temperament and you had great experiences? What are your ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? How much trauma lives in your body?
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know. And for some people, it really is more, I think it's always for everyone, a combination of what's happened to you and your inborn genetic nervous system. And then I see even differently from that is your personality and your disposition, right? There's how your nervous system runs, right?
Yeah,
Meaning,
you
like
can
if
slice it even thinner.
Right. Like if we look at disposition and personality, which are also slightly different, but let's lump that together for a second. It's almost like if you look at two different cars, right? Like a Ford, I don't know, this is where I'm going to like lose my metaphor, an F-150. Okay. I don't even know if that drives fast, but that's that big truck with like the open back, right?
Yeah.
And I know. I don't know my trucks. And then you look at like a Ferrari, right? I mean, a Ferrari's engine is not going to do the same thing as an F-150, even if they're both on the highway being chased.
Exactly.
Right. But then
I liked your metaphor.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wish I knew. I don't know why I picked a truck when like I don't even know anything about trucks, but you get it. But then you have what happens to you. And I do think there are many people, and I know this as like someone who used to work very deep into the ocean with trauma. Some people, regardless of nervous system, what they have experienced is so intense that is still living in their body, and they're living in a permanent state of alarm. And anyone who's even been through something shaky where you sort of face death or a brush with death or something really scary happens, you know how sometimes your body just can't work through it right away.
Right. And then you get somebody who is like a fragile temperament, and then you put them in a highly traumatic situation. That's a mess. We also see people who live through awful things and have very like resilient, hardy temperaments that are able to kind of get through it. One of the things I see all the time in women with anxiety is that they've had to be like premature caregivers to parents. That is like a trend.
Oh, you think?
Or a chronically ill parent,
Yep.
or a psychiatric issue with a parent. That will cue and wire in that anxiety into the system pretty quick.
Right. And also can often produce, I think one of the common presentations of anxiety in women is women with a narcissistic mother who are intelligent and sensitive, and because their mother has emotionally immature deficits and mental health struggles, they are the one who calibrates to that mother. They are on the receiving end of a lot of criticism, withholding, performance-based love. And so they learn to really perform to achieve love and validation. And that can turn into its own variant of type A, where the driver is really, if I'm not doing and I'm not achieving, then I'm going to feel worthless.
Yes.
Or empty or unloved.
Yes. So there's like all kinds of things. And we didn't even talk about like the presence of epigenetics and like the intergenerational transmission that exists in all families, where you have like maybe alcoholic fathers for 4 generations, or like Holocaust survivors, and what gets passed through the DNA just in the fiber of the being.
Yeah.
But okay, so you're picturing my dormant volcano, right? Like people are like, I'm fine, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But like you've got all these things that are putting down pressure on you. And then what I see is that some precipitating event occurs.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's like a betrayal, a loss of a relationship, a humiliation, something that causes deep shame. It's like something just, or deep, deep fear. Somebody gets sick, something happens, and then you're symptomatic. Your volcano is erupting. You're coming in and you're saying, like, I just don't know what's wrong. I'm having panic attacks. I'm flooded by anxiety. I've never
Mm-hmm.
had that before, but you have all these,
Mm-hmm.
risk factors that have preceded it.
Yeah, the
And
volcano is a good metaphor. What I've seen, first of all, I see a lot at how anxiety, an anxious partner, or two anxious partners can really affect one another, and of course
yeah,
there's relational anxiety, but I'm thinking back to when I was working with individuals more and how there were just some people that they were just sort of constantly elevated heart rate, jumpy, jittery, like whether things were happening or not, their legs bouncing and they're tapping and they're
yes,
worrying and they can't sleep because there's thoughts. And then ironically, coincidentally, whatever the accurate word would be, they're in these high stress jobs. Like they're attorneys with these like insanely high pressure cases and they're like an absolute train wreck internally, but it's not visible on the outside. And again, often medicated with alcohol. And then I'd see a lot of people more like you where maybe there's some kind of low level anxiety that exists and it's kind of manageable. And then something happens that hits a tipping point, and all of a
yes,
sudden the symptoms are really taking over and the functioning goes down. And that would be true for what happened with me, I think, where I never thought of myself as anxious as a young person. But I think I kind of pushed aside and stayed away from the things that pushed my buttons and let other parts take over. And I really first experienced symptomatic anxiety after I had my first daughter, Charlotte. And I probably had postpartum anxiety. It was not like anything I'd ever experienced before. I was so worried about everything that would happen to her. I could not relax. I was like, I remember breastfeeding her and, anything you read about that could go wrong, I was like, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, this could go wrong. And I had a very traumatic birth, so that may have played a role in it. But your hormones go haywire and you don't know what they're going to do. And postpartum anxiety is more common in women that already have an anxious proclivity.
yeah,
And I remember taking her to like the Advent Health had the booby buffet. It wasn't even Advent Health. It was Florida Hospital.
the food
20,
buffet.
24
Is this
years
like
ago.
a lactation consultant?
So you'd go with your newborn and because you never knew how much breast milk they were getting. And I had all this anxiety that she wasn't getting enough food and that she was like underfed. And what if I wasn't making enough milk? And it was triggered by the fact that she would only, they'd say 20 minutes on each boob. And Charlotte would only eat for like 3 to 5 minutes on each boob. And I'd be like shoving my boob in her face, like, eat for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I go to this booby buffet and basically everyone came who had a baby at Florida Hospital. Maybe you didn't even have to do it there. And you sat around and talked about it and you had support and then you breastfed and you weighed your baby before you breastfed. And then you weighed your baby after you breastfed, and then you could see how many ounces they got.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but it told you if your kid was getting enough food.
Yeah.
So this is where anxiety, though, this is how it shows you how much it can distort your mindset. Charlotte was born 6 pounds. She literally like porked up like a balloon overnight. She was just a rapid, efficient eater, and I had a ton of milk. So she was getting like the maximum quantity ounces just in like 5 minutes. But I didn't know that. Meanwhile, if you looked at her, it was very obvious that the child was being fed. And I remember sitting there sobbing while I was
Oh my
breastfeeding
God.
her, going like, I can only get my baby to eat for 5 months. Like, I don't know what's wrong. I've tried everything. And like just sobbing.
Yeah.
And then I put her on the scale, and I don't remember if it was like 3 ounces or 5 ounces. She was really little, but everyone was like, holy shit, your kid's like
Fine.
having like a 7-Eleven like big gulp. Like,
But your perception was that it wasn't working. You weren't doing it right. Things weren't going well. Yeah.
and
Which
my
is
child was
exactly it.
starving and was
Yeah.
going to die.
Yeah. But I mean, we're all like, so like, that's the other thing about why women are diagnosed with anxiety so much more is these, we've talked about in other episodes, these like ledges of hormones,
Yeah.
like after I had Anna and I like nearly died in my delivery, I went through like a postpartum anxiety where I would like fly out of bed in the morning, like with just like driving anxiety, like fear, and I'd have to walk like around like a 3-mile loop just to sort of discharge the stress I felt in my body. And I got like obsessive about cleaning in a way where I was like obsessed with like the smell of Clorox. Like, don't even ask me what that was about. But it was so weird. And it was definitely what it shows you is that hormones drive anxiety, and this, this biological and mental piece is so tightly wound, and anybody can find themselves there.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this before we talk into how you cope with it and how you can make anxiety work for you. How do you experience anxiety to the degree that you do today? Because first of all, everyone gets anxious at certain moments. Like nobody's anxiety free.
I think that everybody has specific pain points, and they always say that anxiety will tackle the things that you value the most, or places where you've had like previous experiences with fear. Bar none, can get like, I can be okay with almost anything. Like I have space to cope with almost anything other than health. And there I have
Health
no
anxiety.
margin. Like I can get wound around the axle so quickly with fear. And I think that's understandable. Like, I mean, I know I went to the hospital when I was like 3 and nobody went with me. I have no idea.
What?
That probably like lives in my body.
Why? Why did that happen? What happened?
I had my pediatrician. I was really sick. Said to my mom, she needs to go into the hospital. You need a break. Go home. I was sent by myself. I have no idea how that lives in my body, but I have a feeling it was abject fear. I was a very clingy baby, very fearful baby. So I don't know what 3-year-old me experienced, but I have a feeling my body says hell no.
Yeah.
Around that. My grandfather got sick with lymphoma in 1987. I was 9. I thought the worst thing that could happen was cancer in a hospital. I had an ectopic pregnancy where they you get the sonogram and they say you're going to surgery right now. Like that feeling where the floor drops out and your safety is real. So nothing gets me like health.
Okay.
And to me, to watch people who are like, yeah, I'm getting tests run. I'm like, aren't you like a mess? They're like, yeah, well, I'm just, I'm going to wait and see what's what. I'm like, I would be hard to talk to if I were, when I'm in those situations.
Yeah, no, I think health anxiety is powerful. And definitely I see and hear about that from a lot of clients. And I can relate to that. I think it's scary. Yeah. But my variety is a little more the painful, shocking, violent death more than the getting sick. Believe me, I'm terrified of getting sick and dying, but I don't get as activated by those stories. But if I hear a story of someone who died in a horrific, unusual way, it will really permeate my consciousness and it will keep coming up. And then anytime something is remotely like that, I'll think of it. Now, it may not necessarily activate my body, but I think of it. I mean, to the degree I walk around the lake here in Baldwin, and I do not ever go around the lake without thinking about an alligator coming out to eat me.
I've seen videos like that.
Yeah, and because I've seen videos like that, it's not like the whole time I'm walking around like this and I'm in fear, but the thought is there. Or the places in the lake where the shoreline is sort of lapping up, I'm like, wow, I could just see, like, what would I do? Like, fuck, I don't want to be one of those videos where, like,
I know.
my
She's like, her leg is sticking out of the water.
and I'm
Oh my
like,
God.
yeah. So that's more my variant that really like creeps in.
I think that we all have this, right? Like, and this is the difference between a highly anxious brain and we all have thoughts that roll through like tumbleweeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, our kids are on the highway and we're like, oh my God, what if they get in a car accident and die? Or a loved one's on a plane and you're like, what if this is the time a plane crashes? But the thought rolls in the head, through the brain, and we talk to it pretty quickly.
Yes.
Like, okay, look, it's fine, it's fine.
And that
But
is what I do. Yeah.
yes,
That is
but
what I
that's
do. Yeah.
because you're like normal functioning. But when
Right.
you are in a corner with anxiety, you cannot put those feelings down. You cannot put those thoughts down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they get bigger and they ruminate and they spin and they
Not to
proliferate.
mention OCD, where there's really anomalies that in the brain that prevent you from being able to discharge the thought.
Yeah.
But I also think that so let's say, I don't think, and I've looked at this many times, I don't think I meet the criteria for generalized anxiety disorder, but I have had situational bouts of anxiety where I have the same symptomology as generalized anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
And where part of it is the thing that I'm feeling fearful and activated about is so big that I can't discharge it. The thoughts become ruminatory. I'm cycling through the same thing. I may rationally know fully well that the thing I fear most is not likely to happen, and I still can't get out of it, and my body is activated by it. Like when people say, oh, don't worry about what you can't control, like, fuck off.
Fuck yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, sure, that'd be great. And then there would be no therapists and everybody would be out living their best life.
What helps you when you're in that space?
Getting a lot of exercise, getting my heart rate up so I can balance with endorphins, being outside in nature, being able to talk to people. For me, it's helpful to externalize and talk about my fears. And it's almost like pulling out weeds from the garden of my mind when I can just say, like, I'm scared, and validating that I feel the way I feel, and also shifting into a little bit of inner part dialogue where, what's helped me is befriending anxiety and seeing it as mostly a positive, whatever you want to call it. I do jump out of bed and like tackle the day, and some of it's motivation and excitement, and some of it's like, oh my God, I got to get this done and I want it to be good. You don't really want somebody to go do a performance and not feel any nervousness, because then you're supposed to care. So I think accepting that I feel the way I feel, but then doing the things that help those feelings to stay manageable and keep me in my window of tolerance.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything you just said is exactly how you do cope. I mean, one of the things that I think is so an underutilized strategy is like completing that stress cycle. Like, you have to move that nervous energy through your body.
Yep.
So, I mean, I have a guy that is high anxiety, and he's almost disabled by his level of anxiety, rides his bike for hours a day. That's how he manages, because there's so much tension in his system.
Yeah.
But a run, a walk, anything out in nature is even better, right? It's like where you get just that sensation of, I don't know, nature is so healing.
Yeah, and that they have done studies around people walking and seeing water.
Yeah.
And some studies have shown that it's more powerful, that seeing water for 10 minutes is more powerful than medication. Now, I may not be quoting the research exactly right, but it is something very close to those lines. So we know that we're designed for that to be a healing balm. And you're right, you got to get the activation move the activation through, and some people need more than others. Where I see clients go wrong, people go wrong for themselves, is trying to fight it, trying to talk themselves out of it.
It's fine.
Right. Or like, I'll just suppress this, compartmentalize it, mask it with marijuana, alcohol, workaholism, pornography, television, doom scrolling, and eventually it'll go away. I mean, we know definitively that those things do not help your nervous system.
No, it just makes it worse. And I mean, I think all anxiety is sending the signal of that you're not okay, because it's such a body sensation, like especially clinical levels of anxiety is so in the body, and that you cannot handle it. So that's that's the signal it's sending. You're not okay and you can't handle it. So if you give into the urge of masking all of that and numbing that and trying to, distract from that, you are making that feeling stronger. So we know that like the way to handle anxiety is to confront it and to learn that it is okay and I can handle it.
Yep.
That's all anxiety treatment. That's a huge piece of anxiety treatment.
Yes. And this is why, back to fear and, segue into talking about coping with anxiety. This is why, and I know you do this work, exposure response prevention is the gold standard for anxiety, because there really is no other way to, let's say there's something you're fearful of that you have to do or want to do, right? Then there's no other way to lower the anxiety around that activity than to do it, and to teach your body, not by trying to convince yourself intellectually, but by experientially showing your body, I can do this and I'm okay. I can do this and I survived, right?
And I have to go for my mammogram tomorrow.
And does it give you anxiety?
Oh, hell yes.
Really?
Hell yes. Oh, yes. I have a feeling in there that I want to run out into the parking lot and drive away. Like, I just always feel that way. I mean, I'm telling you, I have a feeling of like, do not tell me that I'm dying, right? Like, it's just terrifying. But I go, and this is where it's like, you talk to your parts, and I have like my self energy that's going to hold that little girl's hand and be like, you can do this. This is you value, back to your values. I value taking care of myself. I value being alive for my kids and myself. I value being proactive about my health. So all of that, my wise adult is going to like drag me in there and like talk me through it and say like, you can handle whatever happens.
And it's okay to feel how you feel. And I do find this to be the most effective way, the taking the action anyway, and the inner talk between parts of self to cope with at least normal bouts of anxiety, right? That I do the same thing. I'm very validating. I'm not like, what's wrong with you? This is no big deal. Get your shit together, ever.
People do this every day.
Yeah. Who cares? I now know I'm a very quirky, fearful little bird. And I'm also a super strong, powerful, very bold woman. And there's stuff I'm not scared of that everybody else is terrified of that I do on a regular basis. And nobody else feels as like confident in those areas as I do. And then there's things that other people do every day that I'm absolutely terrified, and it's okay. I'm me. So I talk to the little girl too and say, you know what? It's okay that you're terrified. I know you're scared. I'm here with you, meaning me, adult Colette. And we're going to do this because this is like good for you. And
you care about this. And this is where people like begin to lose their power. Is like, if I were to let that little girl part win and be like, I can't handle this today. I can't do it. I'm going to call. I'm going to reschedule. We'll do it later. Right. And then the next time I go back to do that mammogram again, my level of anxiety is now up above the old level of anxiety.
Exactly.
And then the likelihood I give into that part again and say, I just can't handle this right now. And you see
Exactly.
this, people do this all the time, and their anxiety about, how scary things are intensifies.
Right. And it becomes crippling. And this is how people end up where the phobia, if you will, takes over and they can no longer do it at all. And in fact, I learned this the hard way before I was a therapist, really, with flying, because after I had a really, really terrifying two bad flights in a row, one of them being on 9/11 and being up in the air while the thing was happening at New York airport. And it was
That'll
just,
do it, right?
yeah, it was very powerful, very scary. And I had had a bad flight before that. And really, until that point, I'd never had a bad flight experience. My dad used to fly little planes. I'd go up with him in like a 2-seater little thing. And I mean, I had no fear of flying at all. This also was during what I now look back was still the postpartum period. Charlotte was 5 months old when 9/11 happened. And I got off that plane and I was like, I am never, I saw it happen out the plane window. So after that, and then we flew around for almost an hour with no information on what was happening, if our plane was okay, where we were going to land. So when I got off the plane, I had not smoked cigarettes in 7 years. I went and bought a pack of cigarettes, sat down on the curb and smoked like 10 of them in a row. And I was like, I'm never getting on a plane again. And thus began a period of time of like, if I went to New York, I mean, one time I took the Amtrak
Are
from
you
Winter Park.
serious?
Yeah,
You
it got
really
really
did?
bad because it was too much. It did not feel like I could handle it. There was too much fear in my body.
Yeah.
Spending all that time in the air, not knowing if I was going to die or not, overwhelmed my resources. And for years after, when I did get on a plane, because I did it so infrequently, like I only did it when I absolutely had to, I would start shaking on the plane like this. I'd start crying before we took off. On takeoff, I would hold my then husband's hand and like sob. And people were like, well, I mean, it was like hardcore.
Yeah.
But I
But I
did,
think what that example shows is like how quickly something benign
right.
can become so like hardwired as intolerable. Like, you
Yes.
can drive for 30 years, get in a car accident, and then never be able to drive again. Or you are a
Oh, yeah.
driver, been driving forever, but you have a panic attack over a bridge, and then you can't ever drive over a bridge again. So these things get wired up in 1 second.
Yes, exactly. And it doesn't even have to be such an extreme thing. It can be, someone swerves and almost hit you and your body goes into like just an instantaneous experience of what it might be like to die. And your body's like, no,
Never again.
Never again. That's dangerous. But my point too with the flying is that I did the exact wrong thing. And I see why, because I was so overwhelmed. But by reducing the amount of flying I did and getting on the plane only when I absolutely had to, I actually really ensured that the fear intensified and lasted for longer. And I'm much better now. The minute there's turbulence, I turn into like, I kind of decompensate. But I'm no longer sobbing on takeoff. I used to be, if I knew I had a flight for 5 days before, I was a wreck.
A mess.
And now I can actually fly without Xanax, without alcohol. Sometimes I'll still
what? Massive exposure?
Massive exposure, and also the luck of massive exposure with uneventful flights, like non-turbulent flights. It taught my body like, okay, yeah, it could happen, but most of the time it's going to be okay. And it's one of the reasons now that I'm so claustrophobic, I still force myself to get on elevators occasionally because I have too many friends and family in like New York City. Like I can't never get in an elevator again.
Yeah.
Right. And I already avoided a little, but like if I start avoiding it completely, I'll never get on an elevator again.
Exactly. And that's a message is that if you have something that you avoid because you're fearful, how quickly can you begin to approach that and expose yourself to that?
And slice it really thin.
Yeah.
So if it's an elevator, don't go to the top of the Empire State Building because then your body's going to go, fuck no. go one floor on an elevator
Yep.
every day for a couple months and then go 2 floors, right? If it's public speaking, get up and talk in front of a group of 10 people for 2 minutes, right? You've got to build a window of tolerance.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And then keep the frequency up. Like I know people who are afraid of escalators. Like, then, see, can you daily hit an escalator somewhere? Or can you like ride the escalators at the mall,
Right.
Just to expose yourself and to like send the signal of like, I can handle this.
You have
But
to do
wanna,
the thing you want to avoid.
I want to shout out to people who are listening to this who've had really crippling levels of anxiety.
Diagnostic anxiety. Yeah.
Whew. And if you've ever been caught in that where you're having panic attacks everywhere you go, or you're just like, you can't do anything, medication is really kind of the thing that we need to like give you to dampen that level of anxiety just to begin to be able to work on it. There is anxiety that's too high to work with.
I agree.
I mean, that's my feeling. Maybe somebody else would say no.
Well, I'm sure there are people, but one of the saddest things that I think you and I both sometimes see and have to work with people through a lot in therapy is there's still, even though mental health has gotten destigmatized, there's still so many people who believe that somehow medication is bad, it's a weakness, it's bad for you. And there are a lot of medications that really, they're not addictive, doesn't say anything about you. It's just turning down the volume on where your system's set. And you'll still have to, it's not a panacea. You still have to learn those other coping skills. But it is so hard as a therapist when you see someone struggling so hard with something that they can't will themselves out of. Yeah. And I've seen so many people shift when they finally do try medication and go like, oh my God, right? It just doesn't have to be so hard.
Right. And that's like a part of it. That's like one piece. It's maybe not where you stop, because then you get the other experience clients is like, this is all a biological process. And like, I just need a pill. And as long as I have my medication. And then it's like, no, the dormant volcano, or the volcano has all these layers. You really have, if you are somebody who has clinical anxiety or deals with OCD, I mean, there's all different types of anxiety disorders.
Right.
It's a signal. You have to take great care of yourself. You have to take better care of yourself than the average person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to use the volcano metaphor again, the activation, the signal in the body that you're in danger, that you need to be on high alert, that something's going to happen. Some systems, whether it's from past trauma, genetics, a combination thereof, are set where the volcano is active and there's lava, right? To some degree, regardless of what's happening.
Yes.
And then there's other people that all of that's in there. And if there's a fault line that cracks, then it may start to activate. Right. Yep. Right. So you've got to really figure out which is for you. But I think we're both saying that, if you feel in an anxious, activated state a good portion of the time, which, let's face it, people really medicate most in society through alcohol.
Yeah, and marijuana these days.
Right, and marijuana.
Which is raising the floor of anxiety, if nobody knows that. Like, it may suppress anxiety, but you come back above baseline.
Exactly.
So you're actually making yourself more net anxious over time.
And just the cultural stigmatized part of this, I was just thinking about this. I remember in the worst phase of my divorce 20 years ago, when I just felt in a constant state of anxiety. Like, how was I going to make money, a job, manage the kids? I had a very adversarial situation with my ex-husband at the time. It just felt like whack-a-mole all day, every day, with like stress. And I always thought of myself as so capable and together that the therapist I was seeing at the time, I had not become a therapist yet, was like, maybe this would be a good time to just take a little medication, help yourself calm down a little for now. And I was like, I don't need medication. Like, I'm not a person who takes medication. I'm a very healthy, strong, capable person who does not take medication.
Who could use the medication?
Right. And then she was like, well, you are telling me how like every night after the kids go to bed, you sit outside and smoke cigarettes and drink 2 or 3 glasses of wine. I was like, yeah, I told you I'm fine. Right. Like, right.
I'm coping, damn it.
Yes, that's how I cope, motherfucker. So the reality is, you know, those to me at the time were, I didn't see that as, meanwhile, that's so unhealthy, but like, those were the coping mechanisms I thought were normal 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had this idea about medication. I did end up realizing that I wasn't doing myself any favors and seeing that I had an idea that really wasn't serving me and wasn't true. And I ended up taking medicine for 6 months. It helped tremendously. I was able to go off it after a little while. It really helped me to get through a crisis rather than chain smoking and, you know, drinking every night by myself. And just, I'd be out there ruminating, like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do? You know? And it was the best thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I think that we're all there. It's probably inevitable that most of us will be at an inflection point where we will be that ruminatory, that fearful, that kind of out of our skin with anxiety that we may have to consider that.
Right. And it's okay.
That's life, guys.
Yeah.
I'd also be remiss if we didn't talk about the rate at which women somaticize anxiety. This is just such a huge thing that I see is that women pull anxiety and stress into their body and it becomes physical symptoms. Men do this too. Yeah. For women, I mean, the fibromyalgia, you know, all of the like sort of nebulous pain disorders that we see and sensations in the body. I mean, women pull stress into their body in a way. And this speaks to why it's so important to learn to be assertive in your communication and stand up for yourself. And is that your body will speak. If you can't speak for you, your body will speak for you.
Right, because this is energy. This is energy. Imagine, to personify anxiety, that there is a crisis happening outside of your house and you're asleep. Anxiety is coming to the door, banging on your door, saying, there's danger, wake up, wake up, wake up. Yep. So if you keep going, la, 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 it's going to bang louder and it's going to bang louder. And if it can't get you to pay attention at the front door, then it's going to go to your window and it's going to try to open. So it's going to that energy and that alarm that's saying, pay attention, you're in danger, you need to act, whether it's true or not that there is an active danger outside your door. It's going to present somatically if that anxiety can't get your attention emotionally.
100%. And we know women, that's another piece too, is that women have these vulnerabilities in hormone health, thyroid health. There are all these things that makes women's bodies prone to anxiety, depression. I have clients come in and I have one woman that always says, I'm in a deep luteal. Which means like her luteal phase is like popping off and she's, miserable because, because of progesterone and estrogen and the whole thing. And we are always dealing with that stuff as women. So it makes us more vulnerable to like all kinds of sensations in the body, headache, all sorts of things.
Yeah. And not to mention, you touched on this at the beginning, but as women, something men don't understand, and it's not just me and my little Dateline fear-based stuff. Women are constantly targeted, sexually assaulted, murdered. I mean, it's a real thing. I've seen those memes or where they say like every single woman has at some point felt unsafe walking by herself. Now, I feel unsafe every time I walk by myself. But like we are so much violence and perpetration is done
It's
to
in
women.
in the ether of our culture. Yeah,
And
it's
then
not
at
great.
midlife, we've got hormonal factors. So I think what we're saying is that, first of all, anxiety is so common to varying degrees. And the disorder, I hate that word, but right, like the clinical anxiety affects as much as 20% of the population. So you're not alone. Explore if medication could be an alternative for you. And if you have ideas about medication, we're urging you to challenge those because there's nothing wrong with it. The right medication for the right person is helpful and additive and a positive. And it doesn't say anything about a person or who they are. And also that there are some very regular things for general, normal daily anxiety or anxious periods that really help.
Yeah, let's go through them. Let's
Yes.
go through
Yes.
like the things that are just universally helpful for healing for anxiety
And coping.
and coping. And then people like talk about there's a difference between managing anxiety and healing anxiety. Like I know Russell Kennedy is like very big, and he has his
He has
childhood is
anxiety.
very, he has terrible
Yeah.
anxiety, but he believes that his comes from like a complex PTSD. He had a
Yes.
did he have schizophrenic father or bipolar father? But
I
something
can't
like that.
remember. Yeah.
So he has like the gut level, like the body level sense of not being safe. And he has great healing kind of mechanisms if you're interested in that kind of trauma-based anxiety. And it's all about bypassing the mental story and going to the body. He's all about the body. And that's where a lot of the healing is these days.
I agree.
Is in the body. We try to argue too much in the mind with anxiety. Why am I feeling this way? I've got to understand why I'm feeling this way. It's like bypass that. That will get you nowhere.
It's true.
Yeah.
Regardless of what is really causing your anxiety, your head is not going to help you resolve your anxiety.
Think your way out of anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
But I what I don't like is when people, and I hope is coming through in this, because there are different versions of anxiety and different causes. And for some people, what I would see in EMDR, if there were variables, even complex PTSD, right? Like if you had a very traumatic childhood, pervasively abusive parents, an activated home, that can be stored in the body in a way that you can really work through by bringing your body and your brain into processing. That was then and it's over. This is now and I'm safe. Yes. And if you can get your system to recognize that, there's a lot of relief. But not everyone's anxiety is that variety. And, I think EMDR worked really well which is trauma therapy, for some of that kind of stuff. But some people's systems are set at a higher level, and they're not going to be able to just work through what happened in the same way. So you got to really figure out what that is. And I think these coping mechanisms that we're about to talk to are helpful for everyone, but some may need more than just this, right? Exercise is one of the best things you can do for anxiety.
Completing that stress cycle, like whether it's like shaking or,
discharge
the stress.
Yep.
Weightlifting. I mean, this is what people don't realize this, but like contracting the muscles and release, that's what progressive relaxation is.
Yep.
And you get the same discharge from like lifting heavy weights. I mean, you get even a better discharge of stress through that. So that's another thing. And none of these things are like silver bullets, but this is a holistic way of addressing anxiety. I think diet's another one that's underutilized.
Yep.
We do know that gut microbiome and the brain are, on the same axis.
So connected, right?
So if you're like, medicating with alcohol and sugar and like simple carbs, you are not going to feel good and your anxiety is going to get worse.
Right.
So that's something.
And so many people go that route.
Yes.
Sleep is another thing. Sleep should be a religion.
Thank you. Yes. And really, like, if people get proper sleep, anxiety can get cut in half.
If people get sleep, and I believe even a burst, I mean, I love what you're saying about muscles, and I can't wait till I start my weight training that was supposed to happen in October because I'm going to be so relaxed. But whenever I get my heart rate up, even for a short period of time, there's a really long effect of a mood boost that's been researched and proven to be true. And that can really just counter a lot of the ruminatory thoughts and the tension.
Yep. Yoga, like anything that like is increasing breathing and presence, that can be great. It's like the thing that I always hear is get out of your head and into your body.
Yeah.
So whether that's walking or yoga or massage or anything that's like helping you just stay present in your body and getting out of your head.
Walking outdoors, I think, is huge. And I even think going for walks where you don't have music, you're not talking, just walking and being still and experiencing nature. And mindfulness meditation, you know, I mean, it's become such a cliche almost in a way, but it really helps a lot if you're willing to develop a practice. What I will never be, and I've been through the mindfulness-based stress reduction training twice in a pretty intense way. And I fought it. I was like, I hate this shit at first in grad school when I took it. And then eventually I came to see the benefit. But I'm not someone who wants to spend 40 minutes of my day meditating, even though I think that would be wonderful. But I make sure I do at least 5 minutes. It's very short. Sometimes I do 10 minutes where I'm just still and I'm noticing whatever's there, accepting it with non-judgmental awareness, right? And letting it go. Like I visualize my thoughts like lotus flowers and I'm placing them on a river and letting them flow.
I love that. I love that imagery.
I've had that vision for almost 20 years. Yeah, it's so calming to me. And it just keeps my brain in a little kind of baseline of fitness to ruminate less or to notice when I'm getting pulled into thoughts that don't serve me and to be able to say, oh, there's that thought again. It's okay.
Yep,
and now I'm going to just
I love that.
Let it go.
And then another one is anything that increases presence. So like they say playing with animals, playing with children, doing anything creative, like arts and crafts, literally. This is why there's adult coloring books. Anything that can just like let your brain kind of slip into flow.
Or if you're Laura doing a puzzle.
Did you see that there is now Puzzle Olympics where everybody gets a puzzle, the same puzzle, and then they set a timer and then it's like a race to see who can build it first?
Is this going to be
that
like
might ruin it for me, honestly. But I was like, oh my God, I have a sport.
Oh my God, that is hysterical.
I know, I'm going to send you the video.
Oh my God, so maybe you'll be in the Puzzle Olympics. Okay, I hate puzzles. I try.
They make some people anxious.
They just make me annoyed. I have a low tolerance for boredom. It's too many pieces that like look the same. I like my word puzzles, as you know. That helps.
I know. I like word puzzles too, but there's something about puzzles for me is about the sorting. Like the quick sorting. That's why I like to clean too. It's like, okay, this goes here. Like the matching.
I love to clean.
I love to clean. It's so
I love
soothing.
to clean. I love to organize. I love to throw things out.
Oh,
I get high of throwing things out. So go for a run and then throw out everything in your house, except, like Marie Kondo says, whatever sparks joy. So, okay. So in wrapping up, we're saying everyone has anxiety. There's some things that can help. And some people have anxiety to a different degree. It can be biologically wired. It can be trauma-based. It can be both. Don't judge yourself. Figure out what's good for you. And if you think you're someone who has anxiety, you're not sure, and maybe you've never talked to a therapist at all, like it's really worth it to consider doing that because it can be so much better than it is.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like proprietary over anxiety information, because certainly
No.
a lot of therapists are well trained, but anxiety is one of these things that you have to do a really thorough intake of people's lives. You have to understand how behavior is functioning for people, how people are doing safety behaviors to keep themselves safe in situations and like stopping themselves from getting well. There are like a ton of anxiety disorders. There's specific phobia and OCD, which is its own
Social
animal.
anxiety, right?
Social
Right.
anxiety.
Right.
These things,
Panic
they
attacks.
require somebody to do a really thorough intake and then design really, really targeted approaches for how
For
you're going
you.
to get better. So
Yeah.
don't go to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing with anxiety, because a well-intentioned person can like make it worse. Because there's an urge, there's this like tendency to want to reassure, like,
Absolutely.
it's going to be fine. You don't know if it's going to be fine.
Right.
You don't know. So it's like the way some people want to intuitively deal with anxiety is not always what's helpful.
Yeah. And for
anxiety.
people who are listening in different parts of the country and the world, it's what you're saying is very similar to the way I feel about couples therapy and really anything that you're treated. Not that there aren't great generalists, but find somebody who really knows about anxiety. There's so much in mental health, and you want to go to somebody that this is something they're treating often. They are using evidence-based modalities like ERP, right?
Mhm.
Cognitive behavioral therapy is also validated for anxiety. It doesn't really work for me, but it works for many, many
Some
people. Yeah. EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing is very helpful for many people, but not for everyone. Same thing with medication. You've got to find the right thing for you. But if you are going to get professional help, find somebody who's experienced in anxiety. Ask them, how much of your population do you treat with anxiety? What approaches? And even if you don't know what these approaches are, ask them and look them up, because, you don't want someone.
Educate yourself.
Yes. And, if you're in a different place, you don't know how to find a therapist, you can always start by looking at psychologytoday.com. You can enter your zip code and you can search for therapists who treat anxiety, but do your homework beyond that, because some people they treat everything under the sun.
Yeah, that's a sign, guys. If they treat everything under the sun, they treat nothing.
Yeah.
And also educate yourself. Like, nobody is going to direct your healing like you are going to direct your healing. So I will list my favorite anxiety books, one of that, and so that you can begin to look and see what's good out there. One of the newer ones that I like is The Anatomy of Anxiety by Ellen Vora. She's a holistic psychiatrist. So she really breaks down anxiety into all of the bins and like shows how all the physical stuff can lead to anxiety. So there's so many components.
Wait, say it again. The name of the book?
Anatomy of Anxiety.
Okay, I haven't read it. I'm going to read
Ellen Vora. I'll list all this stuff. I'll list my favorites on our website.
And put in there too, even though it's not specifically on anxiety, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers.
Yeah.
That's my favorite book. And it's really about those things in life you want that you are going to have a lot of anxiety around because it's scary, and how to cope with it. It's amazing. She's now deceased. I've read it like 5 times and I never reread books. It's so good.
Love it.
All right. So thanks everyone for listening.
We could do like 10 more episodes on this. Maybe we will, but.
Yeah. And I want to do let's do one soon where we talk about OCD.
Yes. That it's its own huge topic.
Because I'm like almost OCD, but I'm not.
I see a lot of OCD. Actually, it's one of my favorite things to work with.
Yeah, it's definitely not mine, but I keep feeling like I have OCD, and then I keep looking at it and I'm like, I just don't think I do, but like I'm so close.
You're on the edge.
I'm on the edge. Yes. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Check out our website, insightsfromthecouch.org, for a list of great books to read. And also we'll list Psychology Today there too. Can we do that so that people can find a therapist.
And I'll list the things that you want to look for when you're looking for anxiety therapy.
Beautiful. We appreciate you all so much. And if you're enjoying our show, please leave us a 5-star review to help us spread the word, and share this episode with any friends you have you think this might help as well. We will see you all next time on Insights from the Couch.
Bye, guys.